Let's be honest, nobody wants to sift through dense legal textbooks. So today, we're not doing that. We're opening up the toolbox. We're going to look at the Environmental Protection Act 1990, not as some dry piece of legislation, but as your essential, practical kit of powers, the very tools you need on the ground, every single day. You're on the front line with this stuff, day in and day out. That mountain of black bags dumped in a lay-by, the relentless noise complaint from a fed-up resident, or the sudden discovery of potentially contaminated land. In those moments, you have to be absolutely sure of your powers, what your next step is, and the legal ground you're standing on.
So that's exactly what we're going to do over the next few minutes. We are going to translate the key parts of the EPA 1990 into a practical, actionable toolkit. This isn't about memorizing clause numbers, it's about giving you the confidence to act decisively and effectively.
All right, here's our game plan. We'll start with the war on waste, using Part 2. Then we'll dive into your powers for shutting down statutory nuisances under Part 3, and take a look at your duties for contaminated land in Part 2A. Then we'll wrap it all up with a clear look at your enforcement powers. Let's get right into it.
Okay, first up, Part 2 of the Act. Think of this as your primary weapon in that constant battle against waste crime, especially the infuriating problem of fly tipping. And it all begins with defining exactly what we're dealing with.
Section 75 gives us our foundation. It defines controlled waste, basically household, industrial, and commercial stuff. It seems simple, but it's a critical first step, because as soon as the material fits into one of these boxes, your Part 2 powers officially kick in. You have jurisdiction.
And that leads us straight to the main event, the core offense. Section 33(1)A is your go-to for any fly tipping case. It is a crystal clear ban on dumping controlled waste without a permit. It doesn't matter if they physically dumped it themselves or just knowingly permitted it to happen. This section is what makes it illegal.
And you know, that ban has some serious teeth. A Section 33 offense is no joke. On summary conviction, we're talking a potential fine of up to £40,000. That's a massive deterrent, and it's a really powerful tool to have in your back pocket when you're building a case.
So, you found the dumped waste. How do you trace it back to where it came from? Well, this is where Section 34, the duty of care, becomes your best friend. It creates a legal chain of responsibility that requires everyone who handles that waste, from the person who created it to the person who transported it, to make sure it's handled properly and only passed to an authorized person.
So you can see how these sections all work together in a real-world scenario. You find a fly tip, and that triggers your Section 33 investigation. Then you use the Section 34 duty of care to follow that paper trail back up the chain. If a vehicle was involved, Section 34B gives you the power to seize it. See? Every step builds on the last, making your case for prosecution that much stronger.
Okay, let's switch gears from waste to community protection. We're now moving into Part 3 of the Act. This is your toolkit for tackling all those statutory nuisances, the noise, the smoke, the smells that can make residents' lives miserable.
So what legally counts as a statutory nuisance? Well, Section 79 gives us a very clear checklist. And it's not just about loud music. It covers everything from premises that are in a state that's harmful to health, to smoke, industrial smells, and even certain accumulations of waste. This list is the foundation for any investigation you do based on a resident's complaint.
Right. So when you've done your investigation and you're satisfied that a statutory nuisance exists, or, and this is key, is likely to happen or happen again, your number one tool is the abatement notice under Section 80. This is the formal legal document you serve to force them to take action. And the best thing about the Section 80 notice is how flexible it is. It is not a one-size-fits-all solution. You can tailor it to the situation. You can use it to demand that an existing nuisance stops, full stop. You can also use it proactively to forbid a likely nuisance from ever starting. Or you can use it to restrict a nuisance, like saying noisy construction work can only happen between certain hours.
Next up, let's get into a more specialized but absolutely critical area, contaminated land. Part 2A of the Act sets out a very specific list of duties for local authorities, and it's all about moving from being reactive to being proactive about historical pollution.
The most important thing to get from Section 78B is that this is a statutory duty. The law literally requires every local authority to actively inspect its area to find contaminated land. This isn't about waiting for a problem to be reported. It's about having a strategy to go out and find these sites and deal with them.
And the process itself follows a pretty clear, logical path. It all starts with that duty to inspect under 78B. Once land is formally identified as contaminated, you then have to notify all the relevant parties, the owner, the occupier, and so on.
And finally, under Section 78E, the authority serves a remediation notice, which is the legal order that requires the right people to clean up the site.
So we've walked through waste, nuisances, and contaminated land. Let's pull all of this together now and look at your enforcement powers as one big picture, a kind of escalation ladder that gives you a clear view of all the tools you have at your disposal.
Just think of this as your quick reference guide, your cheat sheet. You've got fly tipping, your power to prosecute comes from Section 33, and to seize the vehicle, Section 34B. Dealing with a statutory nuisance, you serve a Section 80 abatement notice, and if they ignore it, you prosecute under 80 subsection 4. And for contaminated land, it's the Section 78E remediation notice. It's a straight line from the problem directly to your power.
Now, here's a heads up. One thing you will absolutely come up against in enforcement action is the due diligence defense, which we can see here in Section 33. The offender will almost always argue they took all reasonable steps to avoid the problem. And that is precisely why your meticulous notes, your evidence gathering, and your thorough, by-the-book investigation are so crucial. It's what makes your case stick.
And really, that's the main takeaway today. The Environmental Protection Act 1990 is so much more than a piece of legislation. It is your mandate. It gives you the authority to investigate, the framework to regulate, and the power to enforce. It is, truly, the legal backbone of the vital work you do every single day.
But of course, this toolkit isn't set in stone. The Act is already changing, with new things like Section 34CA paving the way for mandatory electronic waste tracking. So I'll leave you with this question. As technology and the challenges we face continue to evolve, how will you need to adapt your tools and your role to meet them? Thanks for joining this explainer.